Fantastic. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me on Sending Emails Lawfully webinar this morning. I'm Clare Patterson. For those of you who don't know me, I try and specialise in clear and practical data protection advice and training. I say try because every day is a learning day. I'm always trying to learn a bit more and improve a bit more and be that bit clearer. My background is I've got about 20 plus years in risk management in general, in different parts of risk management, but the last 10 years of that have been in data protection. And the last kind of half of that, maybe a bit more, I've specialised in just data protection. And I've also worked in health and safety and governance, and the sectors I work a lot with now are health, education, charities, social housing and small businesses. So kind of third sector type things and small businesses like myself. So that's me looking a bit more glamorous before lockdown. That's the logo in the middle, and I've just popped a pair of earphones there because you can usually find me hooked up to my earphones either when I'm presenting like this or when I'm on Teams meetings at the moment due to lockdown, but when I'm not working you can find me listening to podcasts usually. So any more podcast fans out there, give me a wave. Or true crime especially is my favourite at the moment, so I'm always looking for new true crime podcast fans to swap notes with. Brilliant. Fab. So let's get stuck in. We're here to talk about lawfully, sending emails lawfully. So what does the law say about sending emails and the types of emails that you'll be sending? It's a case of move over GDPR. It's not all about the GDPR. It's about PECR or PECR, which is the Privacy Electronic Communications Regulations, or are the Privacy Electronic Communications Regulations, which just trips off the tongue. So PECR is how you say it. Used to work with a colleague who called it Percy, which drove me mad because it's not in the right order. So I'm going to stick to PECR, and it also sounds funnier as well. So PECR tells us that marketing emails to individual subscribers, and that's the person whose name is on the bill, need consent. And we're going to do a bit of a dive into what do we mean by marketing, what do we mean by individuals, and what do we mean by consent? Because this is where people are most getting tripped up, and where the fines are coming from the ICO. And recently there have been lots of fines for PECR breaches, hardly anything for GDPR, but GDPR is the one that's, you know, in the front of our minds all the time as people who work with data. But PECR is the one that is bringing us all the prosecutions and the monetary penalties at the moment. So definitely one to be aware of. And this is the part that's tripping most people up. There is an exemption for individual subscribers. You can send them marketing emails without specific consent if there's somebody who bought or negotiated to buy a similar product or service from you in the past that's similar to what you're marketing in this email. All emails should have a simple unsubscribe function. You mustn't disguise or conceal who you are. You need to be upfront about what business people are getting the email. And just to be aware as well, today I will be speaking about emails, but these rules apply to SMS, text messages, voicemails, voice messages, video messages, DMs in social media, and anything else that's similar to that any technology that I've not picked up there. So it's all electronic direct marketing. What I hear a lot of people saying that it's not marketing, this might be the type of conversation that you've had with your colleagues or that you've wrestled with as an issue yourself when you're trying to work this out. It's not marketing. This isn't a marketing email, but in PECR and in the ICO direct marketing guidance, we've got clear information that marketing is not just about selling products and services. Also includes fundraising, political parties campaigning, and promoting the aims of not-for-profits. So in the guidance, we've got this definition covers any advertising or marketing material, not just commercial marketing. All promotional material falls within this definition. So you could be promoting a free service, or you could be promoting a fundraising event, or you could be looking for funds, you could be promoting your political party. You're not asking somebody to buy something, but that would still come under the definition of marketing. So that is one of the biggest problems that I see with clients, is nailing down for them which of their messages are marketing and which are not. Not marketing is if it's a necessary service message, it's market research or customer feedback. You're gathering customer feedback. And it has to really be those things. It can be tempting to think, well, we've got a service message, we've got a little bit of marketing, we could just drop that in. Would that be a problem? And that is a problem, because if you put even the tiniest bit of marketing into service messages or survey or feedback requests or anything like that, it turns that message into a marketing message. The marketing poisons the bucket of nice clean service water, if you like. You can't get away with just heading a message up saying this is a service message, which I think it was Uber Eats did it. No, not Uber Eats. Some Deliveroo, sorry, similar thing, different company. I'm slandering them. Deliveroo did that recently, that they sent out a message which was trying to get people to buy shares, and they put at the top, this is a service message. Doesn't make it a service message, unfortunately. If it was that easy, that would be great. So that's marketing. The second word we're going to look at is individuals. Who are individual subscribers? And the easiest way to explain it is anybody who's not a corporate subscriber. So we really want to look at who are corporate subscribers first. So subscriber is the person whose name's on the bill, who pays the bill for that email, that internet connection that's being used to provide that email address. And a corporate body is, a corporate subscriber is a corporate body with separate legal status. So it will be companies, so anyone that's limited, it will be a limited liability partnerships, the LLPs, Scottish partnerships, and some government bodies. So individual subscriber are more or less anybody else. So it's really important to remember that just because somebody is operating as a business, they could be a sole trader, or it could be another type of partnership other than an LLP, and it would still be described as an individual subscriber. So if you were sending marketing emails to them and that email address was of an individual subscriber, you would need consent. So what do we mean by consent? We're going to say now, come back GDPR. We want to look at what the GDPR says, because we look at PECR to start with, and then we have to look at what does the GDPR say as well. And the GDPR, these are the principles. You'll be familiar with these if you already work in this field, might not be as familiar if you're newer to this. But number one, and I think kind of one of the most important, and the most important to get right first probably, although it's a close run thing with security, but is fair and lawful and transparent processing. And this is where we will find consent. And so that's where we find the lawful process. What makes lawful processing? It has to meet one of these criteria. Consent there at the top, and that's what you'll need for marketing emails to individuals. For non-marketing emails to individuals, or marketing emails to corporate subscribers, or non-marketing emails to corporate subscribers, you'll be able to pick one of the other lawful processing conditions. But at the moment, we're just going to concentrate on consent of the data subject. for marketing emails. And in the UK GDPR, that's where we find the definition of what consent needs to be now. So do you remember in the run-up to May 2018, so 3 years ago now, but it feels a million years ago, we were all getting loads and loads of emails saying, do you consent to stay on our marketing list? And they were trying to get that in before the 25th of May 2018, which was the day that GDPR came in. Give me a thumbs up if you you remember those emails. Were you getting millions and millions of those emails? Yeah, fabulous. Not fabulous, I mean, it was horrible, really annoying. Yeah, I'm getting lots of thumbs up. We all had them, and some of us sent them as well. And that was because PECR only says you must have consent. It doesn't tell you what the standard of consent is. For that, you have to jump into what the data protection legislation of the day says. So before 2018 and GDPR, we had the old Data Protection Act 1998, and in that you were able to have implied consent, which was basically, I've told you I'm going to do this. If you don't kick up a fuss, I'm taking that as consent. So if you very subtly told somebody about that you were going to send the marketing emails and they didn't kick up a fuss, then you said, fine, they've consented. When GDPR was coming in, it's got this much higher standard of consent, as we can see here on the screen, that it must be freely given a real choice and actual positive action to opt in. You have to click that button, you have to send that email, you have to say yes please, put that tick in that box. It needs to be concise, easy to understand, not hidden away in your T's and C's. So that implied consent, where perhaps it had been slipped into the bottom of some T's and C's, wouldn't apply anymore. And it doesn't last forever. You do need to be aware that you need to update it on an appropriate timescale for what it is that you're doing. So people were using the implied consent that they could legally use under the old DPA before GDPR came into force to say, could you please now give us your freely given positive opt-in consent for us to continue to use your name? And if we don't hear from you by the 25th of May 2018, we'll take you off the list. So if you want to stay on that list, you need to opt in now. So there was a reason for that. It got really confusing because people were saying because of GDPR, these emails are coming out, and so GDPR is a pain. But it was actually because of PECR originally, which had existed for years and years. That was 2003. But it was the consent was being changed because of that external effect that you need to look at the Data Protection Act that's in place at the moment to get that level of consent. So that hopefully explains why we're getting those annoying emails, and they have stopped because you now can't do it that way. So let's look at a roadmap to lawful emails, and this will bring in some of the other types of emails as well. So those marketing emails, with that really important asterisk that marketing is not just commercial marketing, but any advertising or promotion or fundraising. So if we go down the path of sending these marketing emails to individuals, we are going to want either their specific consent, and that's kind of the ideal, or we can say that they have bought or negotiated before. As long as they've had the chance to opt out or unsubscribe, and they always have that chance every time that you send an email, it's a very simple unsubscribe. As long as you are transparent about what you're doing, so you've got it in your privacy notice, you've got it anywhere else that makes sense to have it in the way that you communicate with your customers, and that the data is good quality data, that before you're sending these emails out, you know that they are accurate and up-to-date email addresses. There's no point, and there's no point for you sending all these emails out into the ether. There is a cost to email marketing, especially when you're at high numbers that you might be in your organisation. So there's no point sending these emails out into the ether if you don't know that the email addresses are up to date and accurate. If you're sending them to corporate subscribers, you can rely on either that it's in the public interest because you're a public body, or if you're not a public body, that it's in the legitimate interests of yourselves, or even the subscribers, you know, if you're telling them something that they want to know. Of course, still, you need to be clear with an easy opt-out and unsubscribe. You need to be transparent so people know what you're doing and who you are when they get the email and what it's actually about. And again, that the data is good quality data. And this is the one where I think it's probably easier to slip up on that good quality data, because you're not having to nail down the consent or have them as a previous customer. You're relying on legitimate interests or public interests, which feels a little bit, you know, less risky. So it could be older data. You're not having to kind of renew that consent. So it's, again, really important. People move on from jobs all the time, making sure that you've got up-to-date data before you send those emails out into the ether, so that you're not, you know, hassling people. It's not unlawful to be sending it to, you know, old email addresses or incorrect email addresses by accident. It is a requirement that you have good, up-to-date, accurate personal data under the GDPR, but it's also bad, you know, public relations for you if you're sending all these emails out to the wrong place. Service emails, let's look at a roadmap for that. So if it is absolutely necessary for the service that you're providing, then you can send that to individuals to whom you're providing that service, and it will either be because it's necessary for the contract that you've got between yourself and that individual, or if it's a case of you might not have a contract with that individual, you've got a contract with an intermediary, then you can't rely on contract because it's not with that individual. Or if it's a case of you've got a contract with that individual and you must get this message to them, but actually there are other ways you could send that message, so it's not necessary that it's an email. And that's something that you need to assess. Is it necessary, or is there another way we can do this? So if you're a very much an online business and you only deal with people over email and you don't even know any other contact details for them, and the way that your business works means that you couldn't spend the money on sending letters or something different, then it is going to be necessary, and it will probably be part of the contract, that we contact you via email. If you're a housing association and you've obviously got their a customer's address because it's one of your homes, then it's probably going to be harder to prove that it's necessary that you send an email. There might be times when you can say it's necessary. Everything needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. It might be something you need to get out there really quickly, so you could say that that's necessary for the contract. Otherwise, it's going to be that you're relying on public or more often your legitimate interests and the legitimate interests of the customers to receive this message. Same goes for corporate subscribers. You're going to be relying on your public or legitimate interests. And as with everything else, you would want to be able to opt out or unsubscribe. Sorry, and I should have I'm going to move that down for before I send this out as a document. You wouldn't allow people to opt out if it was a contract requirement that emails are used. But if it's legitimate interest, you would want to give people a choice. Again, transparency applies to all three, and good quality data applies to all three, of course. Market research or feedback emails. Again, we're talking SMS text and all those kind of things as well. As long as it's true market research, true customer, and you're not trying to slip in a little bit of marketing there, which poisons the clear water, as we were saying earlier, then it's much more straightforward for both individuals and corporate subscribers. You're looking at legitimate interests or your public interests. So again, you need to be allowing people to opt out or unsubscribe with every message, transparent about who you are, what you're doing, and good quality data. A lot of companies will use other companies to do market research or feedback for them. In that case, they would be your data processor working on your behalf. So you'd be the company that's got the legal basis, and then you contract and pass your responsibilities on to the data processor. And then when they're collecting data for you, when they're contacting your customers on your behalf, they need to be clear about who it is they're working on behalf of and exactly what this information is going to be used for. And you can't be using that information in a way that you've not explained to people. Just wanted to touch on, because this is something that's come up a lot recently. In fact, the training I did on Tuesday, we talked about emails as part of it, and about 2 hours, less than 2 hours later, I had an email from one of the attendees saying, I've just done one of the things you talked about on emails. And she couldn't believe that she'd done it exactly as we discussed. So I just wanted to highlight this, that emails in general are high risk. So we've been talking about marketing and the type of emails you'd send to lots of people, but when you're even doing one email to one person, if you're sharing sensitive information or sensitive documents internally in your team, can you use shared drives instead of emails, and then just tell the person where it is on the shared drive? Can you use egress or something similar? I know that some of you on the call this morning definitely use egress, because I receive egress messages from you. Can you use that? And I don't have egress, but I can get into those egress messages. And that's the way that egress works. Or something similar. There are other things on the market for if you're sending anything externally. And this is the one that the lady the other day did. When you're sending any attachments, check, double check and triple check that it's the right attachment for the right people, and that you are not including any information in that attachment that you shouldn't be. So what she did the other day was she sent an email, blind copied it, because the people shouldn't have been able to see each other's email addresses. And then when she went to attach the attachment, she picked up the list of email addresses that she just used to send the email. So that was an interesting one, and just, the timing was unbelievable. It does make me worry about whether my training is having any effect, but at least she did report it straight away, and we handled it as much as we could at the time. And the other thing as well is, if you're sharing any data, and this goes for any business data, anything work related, I would always advise you to use only your official work accounts. There are two reasons for that. If you're using your personal email or your personal WhatsApp and it's something to do with the business, from a data protection point of view, you might not know what security is around that. And if somebody makes a subject access request and wants to access all the data that's their data relates to them, we as the organisation would need to rely on the individuals to give us their private emails and WhatsApps to review. And apart from anything else, apart from that, just feels a bit off, although it is, it would be in scope. It can just be a bit messy. The other reason is that if it's business related and the two people who are messaging are suddenly not available, they win a lottery together, they're in a syndicate together, they win the lottery, trying to say something that's more positive, and they both go off to Caribbean islands and you can't get in touch with them. The only way that the business knows where you got up to is if somebody can access those email addresses, if your IT team can get into those emails, which if they're your personal emails or your personal WhatsApp, your IT team wouldn't be able to. So that's just a bit of a thing that I see cropping up at the moment, that does cause problems and has caused problems with clients. So let's go back to that consent. So we've established that if we are sending marketing emails to individuals, we need to have consent, and it's that high level of consent that we see in the GDPR. How are we going to obtain consent? Well, I talked a little bit about email earlier on. We can't send emails because we're now into GDPR time. All those emails that were coming pre-GDPR had to stop on the 25th of April to be lawful, 25th of May, sorry, to be lawful. And now you couldn't obtain consent for marketing emails because that's considered marketing. And I know that feels like such a barrier, such an obstacle. So what do you do with those email addresses that you've already got? How do we get consent? Letter is the obvious one, and it is lawful, but from experience, you get a very low response rate, and it does obviously cost a lot more. Social media is absolutely lawful, unless it's DMs. Like we were saying, these rules apply to DMs. You can't kind of jump into somebody's DMs and ask if you can send them emails. Also, it's not invasive. It doesn't cost the same way as a letter does. So you can have it on all your social media platforms. You can have it on your website. You can have a banner on your website. So whatever page people go on, they see this banner. You can have a pop-up on your website. All these things that you can do to help raise awareness. If you send out, jump back to the letters. If you send out newsletters, hard copy newsletters anyway to your customers, you can put it in there. If we're talking about new customers, then at sign up is the perfect place to do it. It does require forward planning. It means that for every new customer you get now, you need to be working out, are we going to get consent? What are we going to ask for consent for? What are we going to let them know about what we do? And then make sure that it's in privacy notices and so on. So what are your next steps? You may be feeling like I'm putting up obstacles, barriers here. I'm trying to give you, some ideas about how you can get that consent if you need to. Here's an action plan for how to send emails lawfully. I want to say as well that although I'm saying this is what the law says, and if you want to send emails lawfully, this is what you do, I'm not saying you can't do anything else. I'm saying that if you do anything else, it will be unlawful, and that's a risk that you'll be taking. I have got at the end of this some case studies, and when I send you a follow-up, you'll get the links to that, then you can look at those case studies. We can look at them. I think we'll have a little bit of time to look at them as well. And they're just a tiny fraction of the ones that are going through at the moment. The ICO SSA is coming down hard on this, but it is a risk that you have to balance up. You, the organisation, whoever is responsible for risk in your business, whoever is responsible, where does the buck stop? They're the ones that would need to sign off on this strategy. And so for anybody to sign off on a strategy where you're going to take the risk, they need to be informed. So do share this information with people. All your relevant colleagues, your teams, the execs, whoever it is that signs off on risk. Whoever it is that you're getting pushback from as well, if you're the ones that are trying to say, look, this is why we're giving you this advice because it's not lawful, this will explain to them why it's not lawful. If you're getting pushback, it's not just you being awkward. I've been where you are if you are the one that's getting pushback. So share this with your teams, with your colleagues. Then the idea is that you would identify the types of messages that you're either sending at the moment or you're planning to send. Are they marketing or not? Are they service or are they feedback, market research? And who are you sending them to, individual or corporate subscribers? And put them all in different buckets so that this is a marketing email to an individual. These ones over here are non-marketing to corporate subscribers. We do different things to each of them. Then assess and document the legal basis that you'll need for each message or each bucket of messages using those roadmaps that were provided. Confirm whether you have the right consent or not. Where you've highlighted that you need consent, do you have the right consent? If not, let's plan how we're going to obtain consent going forward for those existing emails on your database. You'll need a plan as well that If we don't get consent within a certain amount of time, what are we going to do? We're going to take them off the list. Are we going to delete them? Or are we going to just hide them somewhere and hope that we get consent later? I wouldn't suggest that, because if it's consent much later, you'll be wanting to refresh the email address anyway. You would want to make sure that it's up to date and accurate. If you haven't got consent, are you even going to decide, well, we'll make a little bit of a risk here, we think that's kind of consent, or we think our records kind of tell us this is consent? You might choose to take the risk. If your data is unclear, if you can't tell exactly where you've got consent, where it's from, because you should have an audit trail of that consent, then how are you going to clean it up? There's a lovely little meme that I've seen going around LinkedIn at the moment, where it's somebody standing at a lectern and there's a crowd in front of them, and it says, the guy at the lectern shouting, "Who wants clean data?" And everybody's hand is up. And then he says, "Who wants to clean the data?" Everybody's hand goes down and the heads go down. And I'm sure that rings a few bells. I'm sure you've all been in that situation. We know that our databases aren't great. We know they need cleaned up, but we know it's a hell of a job as well, and we might not want to get stuck in. Feels like it's a bit of a can of worms sometimes, doesn't it? Once you know what you're doing with your emails, you know that your data's good, you know that you've got consent where you need to, or as far as possible, you've managed to do the steps earlier on. Then you do need to be aware of the security measures around your emails, any external email services that you're using, and whether any of that data is being transferred outside of the UK. Are you using an email provider or a survey provider that sends via email, where they are not storing the data in the UK? What security measures do they use? What safeguards are in place, and what's in your contracts as well? Have you got data processing contract clauses in those contracts, so that they're responsible for something that they do wrong, rather than it being on your head if something does go wrong with that data? You're handing over really precious data. Email addresses and names and contact details are really valuable in the wrong hands, or the right hands, but you're handing that over to this company. Do you know that you can trust them, and do you know that they've got liability for anything that does go wrong? So with that in mind, the fact that I'm getting into kind of data protection here, I did want to just add this last one, that when you're looking at an action plan for robust data protection from start to finish, well, it never finishes, it's a cycle really, this is. You start with your data protection foundations. Have you got your policy, your privacy notices, your procedures, logs, training in place? That's your foundation. That's only your starting point. That was the things that we were scrambling to get in place, either just before or not long after GDPR came in. But there's more to it than that. And I think now, 3 years later, I'm seeing a lot more people now that are at that point where they're ready to embed it a little bit more fully. And they're recognising that 90% of what a lot of companies do is about data and personal data. Housing associations, anybody who deals with lots of customers, anybody who's in the HR type field. I know some people that are on this call, some of those things I've said will strike a chord with you. So it's getting everybody on board, not just the data protection officer or people with data protection in their job titles, but getting everybody, especially the execs, to be aware of the risks, issues and opportunities and threats. And I put it in that order because I like to say that it's a riot. Customer data is a riot. It can go really badly wrong, but it can also move forward good change. I know it's cheesy, but it helps me to remember it. The order of risk, issues, opportunities and threats that are related to personal data. And just thinking about how much personal data you're handling and what could go wrong and what could go right. What could you do with this if you handle it properly? Agree roles and responsibilities, making it clear that it isn't just the DPO, the data protection officer, who's responsible for data protection. You all handle data, so you're all protecting it. You should all be protecting it. It's about looking at the risks and then how are we going to manage these risks? What's your risk appetite? Are you going to accept a little bit of risk, or do you want everything absolutely nailed down as far as you can? As an organisation, what's your approach? And then it's getting that data protection consideration embedded in all policies and procedures, not just the kind of so-called DP procedures. Getting everybody engaged is going to come through training and communications, internally and externally, with your customers and with your colleagues, and then that continuous cycle of monitoring, reporting and improvement. And that's you going back to the beginning. Have we got this right? Have we assessed all the right risks, issues, opportunities and threats? And on it goes. So at the moment, this is something that, as I say, I'm seeing clients move towards this more, and I am soon to launch a new training offer that focuses on this embedding robust data protection into everything that you do. So if you'd be interested in knowing more about that, do make sure you signed up to our mailing list, and I'll get you more information when it's available. So all that leaves me to say is thank you very much. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching the recording if that's what you're doing. I have got here a few case studies. We have got a few moments left, so I'm just going to dip into them. If you've got questions as well, now is a great time to pop them in the chat, and I'll pick them up. Oh, that's great. Glad it's been helpful. Are there any questions about anything that I've gone over too quickly, or I've not included something that you hoped I would include? I'm always very wary of that people might come to these webinars with something in mind and then, oh, well, that's not been answered. If you've got any questions, please do put them in. I'm just going to highlight some of these case studies, which, as I say, you'll get this where you can click on the links later. So the first one was American Express, where they've been fined £90,000 because they claimed that all these emails they were sending were service emails, but actually out of 50 million that they'd sent, 4 million were deemed by the ICO as being for Amex's benefit. Therefore, they would class as marketing. Therefore, they needed consent, and they didn't have clear records of any consent having been obtained or sought. So there was a fine for 90,000. One does have to consider, was £90,000 enough, or was that actually less than Amex might have made by sending these 4 million marketing emails? You know, the cynic in me thinks maybe it might have been worth that for American Express to do that and only be fined £90,000, only in inverted commas, of course. The other one that was one that popped out at me was a home improvements company. This was phone calls they were making. So as I was saying, these messages do apply to lots of different things, these rules, but they were fined £130,000 for thousands of nuisance calls. We have Papa John's takeaway pizza. They were fined £10,000, which feels quite low as well, for emails and texts that they were sending to messages to customers. Again, there was no proof that they had valid consent. And we had £50,000 for a mortgage broker. Again, texts it was for them, and they were sending them to people. Actually, that one was on the back of COVID lockdown beginning, and they decided to try and use it to their advantage and say and market to people that they didn't have consent to market to, saying now's a really good time for you to change mortgage because mortgage rates are low because of COVID and the pandemic and the state of the world at the moment, and we can help you do that. And interestingly, if you look back to about this time last year on the ICO website, there are a number of those types of cases where the ICO has said you have tried to profit from COVID here and you've done it with no respect and no integrity, and we are going to make you pay for that, which I really like to see, to be honest. That pleased me.